and it looks like the swirl is right between his eyes. Swirl is where basically all the hair radiates out from it, so it's literally sort of, it's a crop circle if you like, where the hair comes out in all directions around it, and then it goes backwards and away from that swirl point. And looking at it, he's out of a medium length fur. Some really short hair just around the nose, but it very quickly looks to go long as we come up above the eyes. So we've got a nice black nose, so that's going to be nice and easy. So let's just establish a little bit of colour first around here. It's so short I don't actually know whether to try and attempt to put hair marks on it, or whether just to leave it as shaded wood. I can make it quite dark this way, so I can kind of do both. Now if you can see that mark there, it's acting very much like a liquid on the surface, which is kind of what it is. It's the sap, but it's, you know, you get a similar looking effect if I took a drop of water and, you know, with a paintbrush and painted it on. Now I don't. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, the cheap, yeah. Okay. Well, sometimes you have to be obvious. He's got a highlight on his nose, right? Now I'm going to put fur in here because the nose I'll try and make smooth, just really dark but smooth, because the nose is completely furless, I think. Yeah, let's do that. So, but these are going to be little tiny hairs. Okay. So let's have a bit more heat for this. Do it this way around. So what I'm doing now is using the sharp edge of this shader tool. I'm holding it at such an angle that it's not flat. It's I'm just using the, because it's flat with a 90-degree angle, if you like, at the tip. I'm holding it so the 90-degree angle is actually pushing down into the wood, and that's creating a texture. And the texture will resemble fur. What do I use in terms of, well, wood? Generally speaking, pyrography works best on light woods. You can actually do it on any wood, but the darker the wood, the darker the wood. If you were to smell like mahogany or ebony, which is a really dark black wood, the difference between the natural wood colour, which is your lightest tone, and the darkest wood colour that you can achieve, short of carbonising the wood, is very tiny. It's a very tiny gap, and so you maybe get one or two shades at most out of something like trying to do it on ebony, which is almost black, and so you'd be limited in what you could do into things like line art type drawings or cartoon style drawing. As you get to the lighter woods, the gap is wider, so you've got the ability to get more shades in, and the lighter the wood, the more gap you've got. This is just a this is birch plywood, and a birch plywood is one of the lightest woods. I actually have got some poplar which is even lighter. I've just got that to try. I haven't got it cut to size yet. These are I buy these pre-cut to this size and shape. They make good, little plaques like this for doing things on. But I also quite like working on A4 pieces of wood. Because they're A4, it's a nice big canvas, and I use hardboard a lot for that. That's quite a brown wood. I will show you an example of that. So it's quite a brown wood, so the range of colours, or the range of tones, is reduced. But since this stuff is relatively cheap to buy, and in actual fact I've got a load of this A4 size for nothing, it makes good practice wood without burning up wood that actually costs money. But you can do it on anything, though. I'm doing it on flat pieces, but you can do it on finished boxes, wood boxes, things like that, jewellery boxes. You can do it on any sorts of things, really. You can actually do pyrography on paper. It's on this thin paper. It's quite hard to do because it's so thin, and it takes the heat so quickly that you burn through it. Literally, you carbonise it and you burn through it. But if you do it on thicker paper, or card for example, then you can get almost as many shades as you do with the wood. After all, it is just a wood fibre, of course, this paper. Now I'm trying to be really light here, and I'm basically only getting a couple of shades, and I'm burning it very easily because the paper is so thin. I hope that's what you meant by that. Yes, to your second question. I do artwork because I like art and I enjoy making the pieces. So yes, I'm doing them for fun. I have done them for for family and people who have asked for pieces, or as for presents and things like that. But other than personal pieces, I am quite happy to sell items that I've done, or even people, if they wish to commission pieces, they're quite welcome to do that. Although it's they're not 50p piece. A commission isn't 50p, if you see what I mean. There's quite a lot of work goes into it, and if you stick through the streams on this is probably going to take at least a week to do. So there's quite a lot of work in them. Yes, Wolfgang Girl, indeed, it's a pussycat. I actually seem to do a lot of pussycats, for no particular reason, because they're probably one of the most time-consuming pieces, or a furry animal is, to do it in the style that I'm doing it, which is to apply a texture to the wood, so that it actually looks like cat fur. I'll show you one that we did a little while ago. So that that, for example, is another pussycat. It's a different cat, in case you were wondering, and all of this, as you can probably see, looks like fur, and in person you can actually see the fur, although it's not a one-for-one mark to do with an individual cat hair, but it gives you the general impression of fur on the cat. I have had suggested that I might do a lion next time on stream, with the full mane and everything else, and we shall have to see. Right. As I mentioned with a cat, there's a swirl. It's the centre. It's the centre where all the fur comes from, and everything else sort of radiates out from that on his head, and kind of like on his body as well. So now that generally occurs just right here in somewhere around the centre of the nose, between the eyes, or sometimes just above it. And on this area of the cat, the fur is extremely short. So what I'm doing with the tool is essentially drawing individual lines of fur, and so what I'm doing, because the hair around here is extremely short, I'm actually using really short strokes with this tool, and that then will it'll look more natural. It'll look like it's supposed to look like. It's one of the tricks that you get with sort of almost any art form, whether it's painting or whether airbrushing, pyrography. When you're doing things like textures and copying whatever would be in real life or something, you move the tool in the direction of the fur, for example, or the way something is flowing like a river, and that way you get the right reflections and you get the right look of the piece. If I was doing the fur here and I was just doing it in all sorts of directions, afterwards it would look really would look unnatural. Oh, that sounds an interesting picture. Was it a full face type one, or sort of a distance type shot free? I mean, there's kind of two. When you're talking about animals, there's kind of two methods that seem to work really well for pyrography, and that is close-ups like this, if you like, which you fill the frame with the face, because the face is usually the most interesting part. Or it's if you're talking about lions, it's the savannah, or it's a fairly wide shot with. So you see the whole animal, and it might be looking towards you, but you're doing it on a fairly large canvas. Yeah, waffle. Yeah, I get what you were doing, but first, well, this technique that I'm doing, particularly here, creating this texture, it's only the second time I've actually done it with fur. I always did fur a different way, and this particular tool is a new one that I got. It arrived just before I did the last piece that I showed you a moment ago, and so I was kind of experimenting with it on a practice piece of a railway engine that I was doing, and I discovered that it made these extremely fine lines if I held it like I am doing now. So this is supposed to be a shader, but I'm using it more like a knife. But a knife actually wouldn't produce the same texture as I'm getting out of this. And I tried it on the pussycat, and I was really pleased by it, and I'm just basically trying it again here, replicating what I did then. So it's going to prove interesting. I hope this actually comes out as well as the other one did. So we've kind of got the swirl in there. Ooh, cats! Those cats are fast. I'm surprised. Either he had a really long lens or he's really fast. Mind you, if you've got a lion coming after you, you don't tend to hang about, I don't think, do you? Yeah, but that was a once in a lifetime photograph. Yeah, you get the photograph, but that's your lifetime. Yeah. I'm just thinking the stream looks a bit dark. I don't know how it's coming out at your end. Well, if they get too bad, there's always something called a ban button. Take that how you wish. I'm looking at this on the feedback, and this area in the middle looks really dark, and yet it's. I think the camera's just not dealing very well with the contrast, because the eyes look really dark, and this looks almost the same. But when I'm here in person, there's a significant amount of difference between the two. Yeah, that's right. I'm always somewhat intimidated when I start doing cats, because I never quite know where to start, and I end up just starting and just carrying on, and they just appear. But there's always a, oh god, where do I start when I look at a cat? So they're gonna come up. Okay. So once we get near the top of here, we can start lengthening the hair. Okay. Now this cat's got some white streaks in, and amongst the black fur, especially as we get into this sort of area towards the eye that's on the left. So probably what I'm going to do with that is do some of these, do some of that afterwards with a knife and a cold knife, that is. Yeah. Since the first one of these I did, I'm just gonna try something with the camera. The first one I did seem to be, the on stream seemed to be a lot better. Let's just try. Let's force the white balance as well. Let's let the camera adjust the brightness for a while. See if that helps. I've got something like 100 watt light, 150, sorry, a 350 watt uplighter next to me, and it doesn't seem to be throwing as much light down. I will have to see about getting a small LED spotlight, I think, to shine down on the desk. Oh, well, the stream may be cool at your end, I like waffles. It's not so cool at this end. Temperature in the studio here is nearly 24.5 degrees Celsius, which is close to 80 Fahrenheit if you measure things in those scales. And I've got a relatively low power but quite hot tool just under my finger, so cool is not the thing that comes to my mind at this time. I have seen people do this with actual fire, with a blowgun. Not this particular picture, but pyrography in quite a few videos on YouTube. But they're generally, when you're using a tool like that, you're generally talking about several feet by several feet as the canvas, so to speak. Bubbles Demonkey, good evening, and yay, everybody da. Are you tattooing the wood? No. I am cooking the sap which is in the wood. Fiddlestein. Tattooing would be driving ink into it with a needle. which you could actually tattoo wood. The ink, if you kind of could, it would be difficult because generally what tattooing does, of course, is they drive a needle through your skin whilst the ink is on both the needle and your skin, so they're effectively driving ink through your skin to the layer underneath. Bubbles the Monkey, thank you very much for the follow. I greatly appreciate that. Now you have now substituted your name on screen for the gentleman that was there before, so hopefully, I'm going to say hopefully your name doesn't stay there too long, but it would be nice if it's there for a little while. So it's not exactly like tattooing in that respect, because if you tried ink on the wood, you would stain it. But if you actually were, just had a dot of ink, if you like, on the end of a needle and you dropped it, you dabbed it in, then effectively, yes, you're sort of tattooing, but really you're doing like what the newspapers would do, which is just putting a single drop of ink onto the surface of the wood. And you can create pictures like that quite well. I mean, that's literally how newsprint was or is, in that it's dots, wider spaced and narrower spaced, to create the different shades. Could you burn the sap in your skin? You don't have sap in your skin. It doesn't work the same way. Doesn't work the same way. That's actually not strictly true. You sort of could do it, but on live skin, of course, what happens is you create a blister. So you get the cells themselves just burst, basically, ultimately, but you get the plasma out of the blood, which creates a blister to protect the area. So it doesn't really work that way. But if you take something like leather, or even, I suppose, dried animal skin, you can get a similar sort of effect. It doesn't quite work the same way. What's rather judgmental? Lots of people call you a sap. Well, that's something lots of people have a problem with, but you're not in my skin, so I can't burn you in my skin. That would be weird. You have to make good puns, if there is such a thing. Okay, we've got some white fur just around the corner of the eyes. I'd like to try and keep that, so I'm just going to leave that area for the moment. I will add a little bit in just to darken it down, because it's not actually white when you look at it. There's that much black mixed with it that it's toned down. So that's where the rest are. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is do some of the fur, which this mark here really is the outside of that V, inverted V that the cat's got on his face. So what I'm going to do is do some of the outs away from this before I bring this up to meet it. And the fur here is quite long, so I can make longer strokes. That white area obviously is a distinguishing mark, so one of the things that if you're doing you're doing a piece which is of a pet or something like that, things like the eyes and the distinguishing marks are the things that make it look like the pet that you're after, because the basic structure of many cats' faces is very similar. They do have, like this other one, for example, these two cats. This one, which is Junior, has got a relatively pointy face compared to this particular cat here. This one isn't as pointy, partly because of the angle. The This one is kind of a slightly more three-quarter profile. This is more of a full face on profile, so you don't see that that angle quite so much. But the facial marking, that prominent marking, is basically, you know, the owner who looks at something like that immediately recognises their own pet because of that marking. So it's quite important to get those. Which one? Alula Striker, thank you very much for joining. 0101. Yeah, this is one of our cats. This one is Junior. He often comes and sits and watches the stream, and occasionally he even tries to join it. Luckily, he's not been too persistent whilst I was doing carving last week or earlier this week. But he has a habit of wanting to come and just sit on my knee, lay on my knee, which is obviously just off the front of the desk here. It's not too bad while I'm doing this, but when I was carving, it was a bit awkward. This particular cat here is called Felix, the archetypal name for a black and white cat, at least in England, which I suspect comes from the old cartoon, the old black and white cartoon. That Fiddlestein, that kind of looks like it should be a pun, but I actually don't know. It looks more like French. So I don't actually know quite whether you were intending to be funny there, or you were asking a serious question, and if you were, I don't know. Maybe I'm not reading the text the way you intended it to be read. And I now have to relearn that with this, something I learnt on the last one. Using pyrography, usually I'm working really fast. Well, I'm moving the pen really fast, because if you keep it in one place for too long, you get a dark mark. You generally don't want a dark mark, you want an even, consistent tone. And so I have a tendency to move the pen quite fast. But this particular technique works better if you move it fairly slowly. And I keep forgetting that. Even whilst I'm doing it, I'll keep forgetting it. I can turn the heat up, and I have done just a little bit, but I don't generally like working with high heat because you have to move fast, and it's very easy to get too dark a tone than you're after, and then you've got to work around that, which just causes more difficulty. But so I generally prefer working with lighter temperatures or cooler temperatures. That way then I've got more control, because with this it's additive. I can keep going over and over and over if I want it to get darker. Oh, okay, on profile. Oh, I see. I see. I didn't know that. I don't see. Yeah, maybe. I'd never really thought about it. It isn't actually a term I've come across in doing people. So. Now I'm trying around here not to actually be the line is a guide just to say the difference between the black and the white, but I'm trying not to follow it too religiously. I kind of want the transition between the two to be somewhat ragged, and you know, the fur overlaps each other. It's not a perfect line, so I'm sort of starting a stroke at all sorts of distances from this particular mark that I've made to distinguish the edge of the flash.